There is one other reason why we framed today's event as wicked problems, and we've talked a lot about wicked problems and the way that they turn up and show up and challenge and how we might tackle them. But from a Flinders University perspective, there is another reason why wicked problems, and that is that our Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research has led some research into wicked problems, and you can have a look at that online. We'll send a link out to you in your post-event thank you, your post-event email to you all, not only to the NIN Health Alliance report, but also to the Flinders University Wicked Problems report. So that piece of research went across South Australia and other states as well to look at what are the wicked problems that people have top of mind, sort of almost what keeps you up at night kind of idea, and has delivered insights into a range of key wicked problem areas. So when Trish and I and the team were sitting and talking about how we wanted to bring to you what we have today, that was one of the framings that we brought on board, was how do we help to solve those wicked problems? And I think we've unpacked some of those mechanisms today. Last chance, Slido. Wicked is your password, and you'll notice that you can vote up and vote down. Richard has been over here squirreling away like as if it were voting day. He's going to tell us the tally. What are the most important things? So I might now actually invite Trish and Karen to head up and join us up here. I think I'll
borrow the mic. So thank you for everyone who submitted questions and comments. There are some that are anonymous and some that everyone can see there. So there are some that are sort of hidden from everybody. But there were, and we're only allowed to have 3 themes. You are. I was under the pump for 3 themes. It's hard. I think one of the early themes that came out, and maybe it came through many of the talks as well, was about the idea of innovation and scale. And the question is really around, we are great at ideas, we are great at creating prototypes and doing proof of value, proof of concepts, but how do we cross the chasm between ideas and truly delivering scale using technology into healthcare today?
Good question. I'm going to throw it to Karen.
Sorry, did you? Okay.
You can start.
That wasn't on the list.
We've been monitoring those questions. We've been ticking the ones that we wanted to.
So, I mean, I guess I'll speak perhaps from the medical devices space and not necessarily all digital, but it is an issue, and it's I think a well-recognised issue that people will get to a good prototype stage. You know, we are fantastic at research generally across the nation in all sorts of different areas. But we do fail to then translate that research into product. Running the medical device partnering program, we get people to that hopefully really good prototype stage, and they go off, and then they may come back 6 months later and say, "Look, I've got some money, and can you help us get through the next phase?" Which is a challenging phase because it's not ready for product manufacture. You've still got to go through clinical trials. You've still got to validate your product. But to do that, you've still got to build 100 or 200 or whatever it might be. So how do you actually do that? Many of the kind of companies that are out there who are set up to do that manufacture probably aren't really interested to only make 50 or 100. And yet in the universities, we're also not set up to do that either. So it's that sort of short-run phase which can be problematic, certainly from a physical device manufacturing, whatever that word was. Go for it.
I think sort of building on that, part of the problems that we have in taking things to scale is in healthcare, you're going to have something, as Karen says, that's pretty much ready to go. But also, there's probably a gap, and I know Nithya's, has talked about this too, about getting people up to speed with how, in fact, you use some of these digital solutions. Because all of us who work in it are quite au fait and blasé about, apps and anything digital. But we forget that there's a lot of people who aren't, and you need a balance between having enough knowledge of what those things are or how to use them, as well as that clinical knowledge. And that's the bit where often, you know, the rubber hits the road, and if you're a bit of a Formula One driver like me, you go off the road. I don't do that. But I think that's one of the problems that we face, is actually how do you get people, I don't like the term upskilled particularly, but it's about how do you get people comfortable enough to start to engage in using some of these things. I know from my own perspective, I was quite resistant about AI for a long time, and now I love it. So I think, you know, how do you get people across those big changes? And it's something that we need to focus on more, I think.
Do you want to throw to your any colleagues out here need to add to that?
Come on, Hobbs, challenge me. Yeah.
All right.
What do you
Should
mean?
we do this?
Thanks, Karen and Claire. Trish. I just wanted to add one thing, though, and Karen, we know this well, is that, I mean, the process is difficult and the approvals are hard, but we're a small market in Australia, and new ideas need capital, and they need risk capital, and I think that's what we lack. That's where we end up banging our heads, and I think that's something that's not answered here, but that's a wicked problem.
It is a wicked problem.
Yeah, capital is obviously a constraint, but traditionally in the medical devices, which is all I can talk about, you need to get key opinion leaders on site. You need people who are going to influence people. That initial 3 to 5% of clinicians, and once you get them on board, then others will take them up. The other thing you have to get is reimbursement. Who is going to pay for it? Because, certainly with apps, people don't like paying for apps. And the last thing, and then I'll shut up, is procurement. Australian healthcare does not buy Australian innovation, ever.
I think that's a really good point. And building on that, one of the things, on a more policy thing, is our funding models do not work well with those new innovations and actually taking on new processes. We've seen that where you have, funding thing, we were talking about this morning, there is a huge uptake now. There's as many people in the last 6 months have put in batteries, in solar batteries, as there have been in the whole time that the program has been around. And that's because there was an incentive to do it. And so when you build some of those incentives in, you're going to get faster progress, but we just don't seem to do that very well in healthcare. Somebody in the back.
Oh, go.
Run like a runny thing. You did. That's so kind of you. Thanks, Jo.
Thanks, everyone. I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg, because our government is, trying to ration. We have a really good health and aged care system in reality, but we try to ration the money, and we come up with ways of partitioning off how we spend our money. And a classic example is wound care. So, there's some fantastic new wound dressings that require fewer changes. They cost more potentially, but the time that you count for the staff to go in and change those wound dressings, the pain, the discomfort, that money that you could save by using a more expensive wound dressing is very hard to sell as a saving. And, the classic is a scheme that allows for wound dressings for people with diabetes-related wounds that people can access in the community, but an aged care provider can't access that funding to try these new, better dressings. So, that's a real combination of trying to restrict spending on something that's new and costs more, but not understanding the downstream savings that having a new innovation would have.
I think there's also the challenge that there's downstream savings are not necessarily from the same bucket. So it could be, we've even got the difference between federal and state. So, which part of the federal system is funding what compared to what's happening in the state. And then even within a single hospital, yes, you might get better outcomes for your patient, but, who's actually funding the extra days in hospital and so on and so forth. So it's a real challenge.
I think very valid point there. And I think it also reinforces the point that our procurement processes across government are somewhat maybe out of date. It's a case of set and forget. We go and do a 5+2+2 sort of contract. A lot of innovation happens in that time. And all the effort that we go to run a procurement process doesn't keep up with industry needs. So, if we could try and tighten up that process or move to more of a modern procurement process, whether that's lean or not, I don't know. That would help you keep up.
I think the wicked problems are growing. I think we're going to be we're going to have something to do for quite some time. What's our next theme, Richard?
Yep. I didn't expect that one to go there, but that's good. In Vincent's session, there was a flurry of questions after his session. Personally, I found it fascinating. I guess one of the more interesting questions they're all interesting questions, but one question that came up was we do focus a lot on what's happening in the US, but there is an enormous drive of digital innovation and technology change happening in countries like China that we don't tend to talk about. Maybe not a question, maybe if you want to take it, absolutely, but maybe, Vincent, you could talk to, are there other places in the world that we should be looking at rather than just focusing on the US in terms of where innovation and our access to platforms might come from?
Yeah, so Trish and I are going to throw that one to Vincent.
Yes, thanks very much for that. I mean, the reason why I was focusing on the US is that they dominate the Australian marketplace. So in terms of affecting our healthcare, they're very much the things that we need to keep an eye on. But there is a very good work going on overseas. There's a European Institute for Safety in AI and Healthcare, which has published some very good work. They've actually published a list of things of which you must not use AI for, which is very useful. We don't have such a thing in Australia. We don't have any legal constraints on AI other than what the TGA says. So it was interesting, one of the things that they said you were not allowed to use AI in healthcare was to profile your workforce, i.e. to decide that you were going to discriminate against particular elements of your workforce. However, profiling patients, that didn't appear to be a problem because it wasn't in the list of things that you weren't allowed to use it for. But if we turn to, so lots of good work going on in Europe, and Europe's taking a much more restrictive view of use of AI generally, and in particular use of AI in healthcare. So they're promoting some of the more restrictive international standards, and they've certainly got regulation in Europe that we don't have here, and which the Americans think is, completely counterproductive. Remains to be seen how that goes. In China, of course, there are, in general, only government mandates, and their focus really is on managing their population issues. I mean, they've got, their one child program has been so successful that their population of workforce age is now plummeting. So they are rolling out AI in a massive way in robotics in particular. So whilst Elon's talking about building a robotic factory that's going to build 30,000 of his robots a year, he's still talking about it. The Chinese have actually built the factory last year and at the moment are rolling out between 20 and 30,000 humanoid robots that they're intending to deploy mostly in the home care setting and aged care and in healthcare. So that level of AI deployment, I think, is way ahead of anything that we're envisaging. There are a couple of robots you can buy in Australia that are being promoted for use in home care. Look after you, bring your cups of tea, etc. Trisha's, I'm sure, going to sign up for one soon. But that is very much behind what's happening in China, where they're actually rolling that out. I don't think we're going to see that happen here. The strictures and regulations that control that are so strong and government controlled is likely to happen. And it's so the opposite end of the spectrum to what's happening in the US that it's going to be very interesting to see how those two diametrically opposed approaches work out. But certainly China is investing huge amounts in AI, and not just doing it in theory, they're really rolling it out, but they're focusing on autonomy, robots, and cars and that sort of area. They're not focusing on global domination the way the US is.
So Trish would just like to know if there's a robot out there that will mix a good gin and tonic. Excellent.
Well, could you please find me one?
I think we've got time for one more. Were there any comments on that? Maybe that can be our one more. I can see that. I can see out there, and the glasses are glinting in the late afternoon sun.
Oh, quick, I'll ask the last question.
You ask that.
All right, so the last thing, and I'll put a few things together for this last question, and it's really centres around, in healthcare, we typically have some red lines that we don't like to cross or have never crossed in the past. So there's been, whether it's an ethical red line or a policy red line. The question is, does advances in technology like AI mean that we need to rethink the red lines and policies that we have in place today?
May all your lines be blue. Do we have to rethink? I think we need to start to consider better what those advances can be, and therefore think differently about that. So I think some of those red lines need to probably become less straight and more wiggly. I think a lot of that comes down to, though, people understanding what the impact of those technologies and the things we might want to do. And like your comment at the back, a lot of it comes back down to not only what is the benefit from the patient, but also then how is that being funded? Because regardless of all of our wishes and desires to make everything better, ultimately it usually comes down to a funding model, which is unfortunate, but it just happens to be the reality.
And I think I would say, yes, absolutely, those lines should be dynamic and in response to what's going on, but always and absolutely with the patient at the centre of that. So if it's safe and effective for the patient, then the line can move, otherwise it shouldn't.
Thank you. I think it's time for some final concluding remarks.
Not to be between me and wine, let me tell you. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I'd like to thank all of my colleagues for their insights today and for volunteering, although I'm sure most of them would say it was coercion rather than volunteering. And I'm sure you can appreciate now that from the wide breadth of things that we've seen this afternoon, there are probably more problems than solutions, but working together, and nearly every single one of the people talking this afternoon were talking about collaboration between different areas. All of our solutions are going to need to be data-driven, collaborative, and very much, as Karen says, they really need to focus on being patient and person-centred. So we look forward to your comments, your collaboration, any ideas you have, and working with you as the community to try and solve some of these problems.
Beautiful. Please join me in a nice little round of applause. And then we have a showcase out here of 3 demos, some wine and cheese, some soft drinks and some tea and coffee if that's your preference. And it's a chance to get to know some of the people. But please join me in thanking all of our presenters today.
You're not on.
I'm off. I had one more thing to say. It was this one. Sorry, my remiss. I just did want to let you all know about this one too. So this is ICA is holding 2 workshops. It's a repeat workshop next week. Topical area, fast-tracking AI adoption in 2026. These are the two workshops are one after the other, so they are a repeat workshop. It's just an hour out of your day. Head on down to see us at Tonsley Innovation District, and you can see we've partnered up with Moots Technology, who is another of the tenants down there, to deliver that to you all. And let's kick off a conversation and let's kick off some action in that AI space.